Hello, I'm Jason.
I'm Mike.
So we want to talk about recessive genes versus, well, not so much versus, but like comparable to codominant or incomplete dominant. And even dominance is out there. I'm not super familiar with dominance. That's more of a Boyd thing as far as I'm aware.
And for a lot of hobbyists out there, I think this is where things get a little confusing because we also want to talk a little bit about how these genetic traits differ from line breeding. But yes, dominant isn't so much a colubrid thing. You were saying that's more in the Boyd world, boas, pythons. So first off, what's the difference between a codominant gene and a recessive gene?
Well, first we'll break down recessive. Simple recessive is very common in colubrids, and it's out there in the Boyd world too. And those are more valuable than the codoms because they take a longer process to get. So a recessive trait, if you breed, most of the color morphs are recessive in colubrids. So take an albino, breed it to a normal, unrelated normal, you get all normals. But since one was visual, you get, they're all carrion, they're all hets.
They're all het for albino.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you have to have like either a visual or a het to make more.
Gotcha.
You can't just bring it out of the blue. And don't get me wrong, like adding new bloodline is so important. Please do it if you're a breeder. Outcross your stuff. But some people want to take that. They don't want to take that shortcut. They just want to take that shortcut and just make albinos. And make albinos are worth more money. But breed in some new blood, get some healthy genetics going on.
Right.
So,
and then those hets can make albinos later.
And you'll make, And I like to breed a visual to hets. Like, I do that a lot. And so.
Now, that was recessive. So, a codominant trait. How does that work?
A codominant, and I think of a few. I'm thinking a few colubrids. I'm thinking anaconda hogs, striped Pacific gophers, motley Great Basins. Those, if any of those are visual and you breed it to a normal, even if it's unrelated, you'll get 50%. I think in the Pacifics you get 100% striped. It's a little tricky, and I had to learn. And I had to learn, and people taught me too. Like, so you breed a striped Pacific gopher to a normal, and you'll get all stripes. Then you breed these stripes back, and you're like, well, they're all gonna be striped. Well, you'll get some normals. It works in reverse almost, like it makes hets normal, or like the head almost. It's a trip, but.
So that actually kind of makes sense relative to the names. So a recessive trait, you've got to breed it to something known if you're going to replicate it.
Yeah.
The dominant trait can actually be dominant over the normal. Yeah. And you're at least going to get 50%.
Yeah.
And in some cases you might get 100%.
Variance, yeah.
So that makes sense.
And then when you breed a visual anaconda or motley Great Basin to another motley or anaconda, and you get what you call a super. So you get this patternless.
Right. Patternless.
We should have talked about that in the patternless thing too, but
yeah.
Because you can have a patternless super, and you can have a pattern or a recessive patternless too. So it's like that can get tricky too. There's another door.
Yeah. There's a lot you have to keep track of each year.
And every species.
And every species can be a little bit different. Now, how does line breeding differ from these genetic traits?
Line breeding
is more about the visual. And it may or may not pan out, correct?
Yeah. I mean, line breeding, you're basically just refining colors and patterns. You're just making everything better. That's what line breeding does. But some traits you almost need to, like a yellow bull snake or a red bull snake. If you line breed them, you get more intense colors. You outcross them, it just like fades them. So
it washes them.
Washes them out.
So even in cases where you have a genetic trait you're starting with, you can then line breed on the back end. Take maybe your 2 best colors, breed those. You know the genetics are already there. So actually you can do both. You can work with the genetics and line breeding.
Yeah.
And they go hand in hand.
Yep.
Okay.
And line breeding makes prettier animals, but still, well, outcrossing is a good thing. We talked about it a little bit. So.
Yes. And explain outcrossing for the hobbyists out there that may not be familiar with what you're talking about.
Right. Outcrossing, what I call outcrossing, is adding in unrelated bloodlines. Not so much genetics, but just blood. Like,
yeah. Breeding unrelated snakes.
That's why people don't line breed, because you get defects. You get problems.
You can only do it so long.
And you do get them with snakes, but it takes a lot more of line breeding, and you can outcross and strengthen them right back up like you do it once, and it's just like boom, all of a sudden the snakes are bigger, stronger, healthier.
And by the way, it's controversial in some circles, but that's where wild collection comes in too. You can only outcross so much, breeder to breeder, and things like that at some point.
And sometimes you're
bringing in wild.
Everything's kind of like So I want to bring in something fresh. Like I want to go catch me a Great Basin gopher snake and plug it into this triple morph or something. And then you get, which is cool because you can breed a normal. Like if you had a triple visual and you breed a wild caught to it, and you're going to get all normals, but all those offspring are outcrossed, and all those offsprings are triple het. And so you got a powerhouse automatic, healthy, it's great.
Plus, you don't know until you do it what hets the wild might have.
Yeah, and I've worked on projects. I've had projects, and like I'm working towards something, and all of a sudden something wild pops out. Like this is an example. I was working with Great Basins. I wanted to make orange albinos. Bright, I got some orange bloodline in there. Got it mixed in the yellows, in the albinos, and all of a sudden I get this anery. I'm like, well, I know that albino didn't have anery. I know. And then aneries just pop out, and
it's a result of the outcross.
And stuff happens. It happens.
There's always going to be a little mystery.
That's why, like line breeding, you get a lot of surprises. Not a lot, but occasional, and it's great. It's fun. So,
for you breeders out there, or for hobbyists, let us know what questions you have about the genetics. We'll keep going on the genetic lingo, and let us know what experiences you've had. What interesting things have you had pop up when you're breeding, thinking you know what you're going to get, and you get something interesting. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.